Welcome back in, everyone. I'm joined by Jim Sedley, who is, by your title, the Executive Director of UMaine School of Policy and International Affairs, but most people call you Captain, Cappy. I'm going to have you explain that before we proceed.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So I was in the service for 27 years before I got out of the Navy and joined University of Maine and have been there for now 15 years. But I retired as a captain, and I wear my service on my sleeve, and so I have the leather coat, and I have those. I wore my flight suit for Halloween yesterday.
All the things, yeah.
And so, so the students call me captain. The students in the graduate program.
All
and
right.
So I go, "How come captain?" And they go, "Because well, we don't get to call anybody else captain, so we want to, we get to call you. So captain, Cappy, whatever it might be."
You take the unique opportunities when
Yes,
you
ma'am.
get them.
Yeah.
And also important to note that you were the former military assistant to Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld as well.
2001 to 2003, I sat next to Secretary Rumsfeld. Did all his international travel.
Yeah.
We sat this close, and so I know how the sausage is made in the Pentagon.
All right. Well, speaking of all of that experience that you garnered, now you're bringing that to the forefront in terms of your work in policy and foreign affairs. And so let's talk about that because, of course, no big secret, major presidential election coming up, and foreign policy is absolutely front and center here. I want to go specifically starting off with Iran, Gaza, Hezbollah, Middle East conflict that's been ongoing now. It's certainly a boiling point issue. You know, if you were going to get in the ear of either of our candidates, what would you tell them about how they need to move forward with that situation?
Well, I wish I knew how to move forward with that situation. What I do know is that each of these candidates is going to move forward in a very different way. I was telling the students in my class the other day that this was likely the most important election ever. I mean, in the history of the world. There's been a lot of important elections. We've seen in a lot of different times of conflict, but no election is going to have the global impact that this election is going to have. We talk about Americans being mostly concerned about immigration and in economies. Both of those are global policy, foreign policy issues. But this next president is going to inherit a world where the Middle East is falling apart. It is on the edge of either cooling off or getting worse, and likely getting worse between Iran, Israel's attacks on Hezbollah. Where do we go with Gaza after something, whatever it might be, is done? The president also inherits a conflict in the Ukraine that is a war. It's a war against autocracies versus democracies, and maybe we'll get to China in a second. But the Middle East is the piece that is really, this next president will inherit a regional war and do what they can to go ahead and keep it from being a global war. And if it turns into a global war, it does become impactful upon our young men and women, about our economies, about everything that we are going to be worried about with this election.
Yeah, I don't think people can underestimate the pervasive effect of what's going on in the Middle East here at home, for sure.
And we forget about that because everything in the news, right, is about next Tuesday. And then we all know, I think everybody assumes that it's going to be not just next Tuesday, it's going to be for a period after that. At the same time, the world is falling apart in the Middle East. Xi Jinping in China is watching closely. And he will decide to take Taiwan based on what he sees in the White House in the next 6 to 8 months. That is, you think the Middle East is bad, and it is, and Russia, Ukraine is bad. This axis of, it's not the axis of evil, but this axis of opposition, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, is becoming closer together, strengthening, and the next president is going to have to deal with each of these characters, each of these players, in a very different and difficult way. So yeah, the next president is probably inheriting one of the most dangerous worlds that could possibly imagine. So foreign policy, foreign security, global security, absolutely incredibly a part of this election.
So then also interesting to keep an eye on, and we do have to wrap up, but also then interesting to keep an eye on whoever is elected, not just who is elected, but then who they put in their cabinet.
You hit the nail on the head, because it's not about former President Trump, and it's not about Vice President Harris. It's about who they bring with them. And maybe Vice President Harris keeps who, she's going to keep some of the incumbents. She's going to put some of her own people in place. President Trump's going to bring in a whole different group. What the advice that he gets or she gets from their appointees, that is going to determine whether we move forward in a diplomatic world or we move forward in a world that requires more military, more bullets, as General Mattis used to say.
All right. Well, so many things to keep an eye on, not just the figureheads, but everything that happens in between and underneath.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's not, and it does impact Mainers. Unfortunately, it does.
Absolutely
and it really
does.
will.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Cap, for being here. We so appreciate it. Folks, stay with us. Your updated extended forecast is